5 Live Formula One.
Lando Norris is in pole position for the US Grand Prix, but it was a close call with Max Verstappen clearly having the pace, but a yellow flag at the final corner by George Russell meant that it was game over and Norris inherited almost that pole position. We will dissect it all in a moment and hear from the top three as well and George Russell. But alongside me, Harry Benjamin, our lead commentator, and Mark Priestley, former McLaren mechanic, and Norris. He was a lucky boy out there, I think, because it wasn't his to take.
Well, you met your own luck in this game.
Oh,
and at the end of the day,
lovely.
Lando Norris put in the lap when it counted. And actually, I think Norris was deserving of pole because after almost a bit of a talking to by his engineer, Will Joseph, to sort of just stay calm, don't overdrive the car, the pace is there, it'll come to you. I'm paraphrasing those words. And Norris drove a mega first flying lap. That was enough to take provisional pole. And ultimately, Verstappen didn't do it in the early stages of Q3. And then you always leave yourself at risk in qualifying for a yellow flag. And that came courtesy of George Russell when he went through the left-hander of turn 19 too quickly and went off into the wall. Yes, Verstappen was probably the quicker driver. Well, he absolutely was the quicker driver and was on for a better lap. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. Sorry.
I think I'd quite like a pep talk from Will Joseph as well. I mean, you just boosted me by talking about what he said, let alone actually speaking to him. What do you think?
I agree. I think Lando delivered a lap that was about as quick as that McLaren was able to do around here on that first run in Q3. And it wasn't going to be quicker than the best lap that a Red Bull could do. But Max Verstappen didn't do the best lap a Red Bull could do at that time. And yeah, of course, you can say, well, he had the opportunity to go again, and he did at that point. So he wasn't worried. And on the second run, he was delivering a lap time that I think would have absolutely blitzed the McLaren. But then the yellow flag came out, and he was compromised. So it does come down to taking the opportunity when it's in front of you. And on that particular moment, it was Lando that did it.
Lando trails Max Verstappen by 54 points after the sprint race. So he knows what he's got to do. He's got to go out there and have an amazing start.
He's got to have an amazing... He's had some issues with the starts. He keeps denying it. He keeps talking about or playing it down at least. But he has had some issues on the opening laps of races. They're not always been related to his start, but he's had compromised opening laps on a number of Grand Prix. But in the sprint this weekend, he absolutely nailed it.
Yeah, he can nail it when he's not on pole. He just needs to nail it when he's on pole. But I think psychologically.
The bigger issue is that the start is almost not really what's going to determine this race. Max Verstappen, quite frankly, has a quicker car. And importantly, what we've already seen, having had a sprint, is that the McLaren was compromised in terms of tyre life. Over a 19-lap sprint, it was Lando that was hanging on for dear life as the tyres went away. Max Verstappen, all right, he was running in clear air at the front of the sprint, having got himself into that position. But because of that, he was able to drive quite comfortably and under control. So that, I think, if we carry that forward into the race, might be Lando's biggest challenge.
You know, I think the run up the hill to turn one, you cannot underestimate that. I think it's actually one of the most unique kind of first corners of a Grand Prix because, I mean, the sheer elevation change, it's almost like stacking up seven and a bit Formula One cars stacked up on top of each other. That's how high turn one is. And then the
certainly
apex
felt like it when we ran round it the other night,
yes, it
didn't
did do that, and then I had to have a 10-minute break at the top.
How many times are you guys going to mention this? Just so I know, are you going to do it in the next checkered flag?
We're proud of it.
That was Mark's second 5K of the day as well, can you believe it? But when you get to the top in an F1 car, it's a lot quicker. But the elevation change is huge, and especially on lap one, it's a weird apex because you're sort of searching for it, hunting for it, and then suddenly it's there and it really starts to narrow up, having come from such a wide berth. Norris got a brilliant start today in the sprint, found his way up from fourth up into second. Norris is starting on pole for the Grand Prix. He's going to have to be looking at the two Ferraris behind as well because they are challengers. They are racy, and actually it's a four-wide entry into turn one. So Norris isn't just going to have Verstappen on his case. He's going to have the two Ferraris as well. So it is about nailing the run up the hill and holding on to it and trying to get a clean exit as well and hope that you don't get punted into. Was it a couple of years ago? Carlos Sainz started on pole and got punted round at the first corner. He didn't have the best start, got punted round the first corner by George Russell, braking late from a little further back, and quickly you find yourself bumping into the front runners. So it's a risky turn one for Norris too.
Well, let's hear from our pole sitter. It is Lando Norris.
The whole weekend we struggled a lot, so for me my confidence was pretty low. Doesn't mean I wasn't optimistic about hopefully going out and getting a pole and putting in a perfect lap like I did, but nothing led us to believe that we would be standing here today and be on pole position. So no, I'm very, very happy. I wasn't expecting it. I did it by probably doing the best lap I've ever done in qualifying, which is a nice feeling, but when you do such a lap you want to be on pole by at least 3/10. And the fact I was only on pole by 300 isn't very comforting for tomorrow. And the fact that Max was another 1.5, 2/10 up on his lap shows that we still don't have the pace of them. But we're on pole, and we've given ourselves a best chance tomorrow to turn it into something bigger.
Yeah, you kind of have to celebrate the pole, but also be realistic about the fight. And it seems like they've found something, or have you lost something? What do you think's happening at the moment? Because he had such a convincing lead last time out.
That was just last time out. People in general failed to just read into things and look at more facts, and people are just too quick to judge just a timesheet and just look at that and go, well, they're quickest, they're slowest, and whatever. There's a lot more to things, and we've not been convincingly the quickest in several of the races. We might have won, but we've not always had the best car. Other people have made mistakes. Not everyone else is perfect. But neither are we. Like, there's been races where we've not been on pole and we've not won because we've done a bad job. There's probably too many of those races this year. But other people can do the same. And that was probably a bit of today, was we maximised a difficult weekend and we've come out on top. But we've just not been the quickest, like in Baku and like now. We've been struggling a little bit. But Oscar turned that into a win, and that'll be my inspiration for tomorrow.
So, that was Lando Norris. Two interesting points, I think, there. He is adamant that McLaren do not have the fastest car anymore. And you could hear him saying that repeatedly in his press interviews. And what do you take of that? Because he is almost aggressive with the style of, we haven't got the fastest car, we never have, look into the numbers, don't believe what we're all talking about, there's more to it than that. I mean,
there always is more to it. Having been on the inside of these teams, there's always more than just the lap time or the results sheets say. But, if we look back over the last, half of a season, since Miami, and particularly in the last 5, 6, 7 races, McLaren have got a car that has this really wide operating window, which, even if it's not the outright fastest at a certain Grand Prix, it's always there or thereabouts in almost all conditions. The one thing I definitely agree with is that he hasn't got the fastest car this weekend, but it might just be that it's circuit specific. It's a very bumpy track. It's been resurfaced in large sections across the lap itself. So it might be that they have found a little bit of a challenge in getting that particular car to work in these conditions on this racetrack, where others have found it easier.
It is intriguing, though. I think it's a trend we've actually seen all season long, where the search for sort of consistent competitiveness from not just McLaren, from teams, look at Mercedes, look at Aston Martin, a little further down. It's almost like you can have a massive jump one weekend from one Q1 to Q2 session, from FP1 to FP3, but then it all falls away from you. It's curious. And the other thing I just thought maybe is something to factor in, we were expecting a lot of upgrades to come here this weekend as sort of the last push before the end of the year. Red Bull have brought an upgrade with Verstappen. McLaren have elected not to. I understand they've still got something in the tank, but I just wonder for what is a car that should kind of suit this circuit, because it's sort of an overall all-rounder, and all three sectors of this track are all quite different. Together you need a complete package. Maybe is that something that maybe is just going against them a little bit?
I think the sort of lack of upgrades for McLaren are maybe not the biggest issue. They will still have a new floor, I think, that they will bring to the car at some point. They just want to hold fire and get a real understanding of what the car is like right now. I think the bigger issue, which you just touched on there, modern Formula One cars, particularly cars of this particular era at the moment, are so on a knife edge. And you see it up and down the grid. Ferrari brought nothing to this race, and here they are as one of the most quick cars out there. It's on a knife edge. A millimetre or two of rear ride height going the wrong way can just make the car almost undrivable and catapult you up or down the grid. So there's a lot of confusion from the teams about how exactly you find that sweet spot. It's not always obvious. And McLaren have had this slightly wider window where they've been more often than not able to get themselves into the right window.
Yeah, we'll hear actually from George Russell in a while, and he absolutely says and agrees with you both that sometimes you hit gold and other times you just hit a load of... Anyway, the other point, Lando Norris, he said he thought that lap in qualifying was the best lap he has maybe ever driven in qualifying, which is quite a bold case. I mean,
the power of Will Joseph.
We were the last people that he spoke to in the media pen, which is where all the drivers come after they qualified. So he'd obviously spoken to a lot of other people, but in his mind, he honestly and proudly delivered one of his best ever qualifying laps. It's really interesting to hear him say that.
I think the fact he is sort of saying that and feeling confident within himself when, the numbers haven't reflected him being, outright for the win since FP1, is it sort of shows when others within other teams, Red Bull and Helmut Marko, are looking at his mental resilience not being as strong perhaps as Max Verstappen. I think that's complete rubbish, but I think that sort of backs it up. Norris being that kind of mature and strong enough within himself to go, that was a brilliant lap and I got absolutely everything out of it. When we're all bigging up the championship charge, the sprint wasn't the best start to the weekend for him. These are good signs, I think, mentally for him.
And that's exactly what he's talking about when he's saying, don't just believe the numbers, because, he may have got absolutely everything out of that car today. And had Max Verstappen been able to deliver his perfect lap time, he may have been 0.3 off the Red Bull. Doesn't take anything away from the lap that Lando drove. It was the very best lap he could deliver with that car in these conditions around this racetrack. And he has to be very proud of that, and he clearly is.
Let's hear from Max Verstappen. He starts in P2. How long will he stay in P2? That's the question.
For me, I'm still very happy. We were really there, to fight for pole. And that's very positive because that's been quite a while that we had a shot at it. And hopefully, of course, also with the changes that we made, that it will work for tomorrow.
Yeah, it feels like you've reeled them back in this weekend and we've already had one race which you've won. So are you... Well, how confident do you feel going into the race?
If we can replicate something similar to what we had in the sprint, then I'm confident. But of course, also other people, other teams, they made some changes to their cars. They learned from the sprint race, so still a bit unsure, of course, how competitive everyone will be, but we'll for sure be more competitive than we have been lately.
So just listening to Max, I think he takes all his confidence from his performance in the sprint.
The sprint was cool, calm and collected from Verstappen. He had that in the bag straight away. And to be honest, if it's clean tomorrow and there's no sort of mayhem or sort of weird safety car or strategy, this is Max Verstappen's race to lose. I think they've done a great job of sort of bouncing back from some poor form. He hasn't been on the top step of a podium in any kind of race since the Austrian sprint. Finally broke that duct in the sprint here in Austin, and I fully expect him to stand on the top step of the Grand Prix podium come the end of Sunday, all being well.
I think the same, yeah. I think if you look at what Max Verstappen has been able to do this weekend, he's been able to deliver real promising and real solid lap times, but crucially he's been able to do that whilst remaining under control. He's looked smooth, calm and collected. He's not had to push the car beyond the limits. If you look at George Russell in the Mercedes, where he delivered almost identical lap time in the qualifying for the sprint, George's lap time was done by hanging over the ragged edge of performance. He just about clinging onto it, whereas Max was kind of under control all the way around. So he may even still have a little bit more in the tank. And having had those struggles in the season so far, when an opportunity like this one comes around, where your car comes alive, he's got to take it.
And if he does manage to win tomorrow, and let's say Lando's in P2, he'll extend his lead in the championship to 61 points, 5 races to go after this weekend. I always felt coming into this that this was a tipping point. Either there was going to be a championship challenge or there wasn't. And Lando is, I think, clinging on by the end of his fingertips right now. Do you think I'm overplaying it?
No, I don't think so. I think Lando
That's
Norris.
a shame.
I think Lando Norris needed to come here this weekend, win the sprint, put it on pole for the Grand Prix and win Sunday's race in order to keep this championship challenge alive. I want it to go all the way to the wire, we all do, but ultimately I think the pendulum is swinging now towards Max Verstappen.
I'd say so, yes. The only thing I would say is we'll keep coming up with numbers in terms of the average numbers he needs to outscore Max by every single race by the end of the season to make it happen. But But the point is, he's never going to do that. He's never going to win every race and have Max finish second or whatever. It's more likely going to be that there's going to be one race where one or the other is going to be heavily compromised. Either they get tagged in turn one and end up towards the back, or they have some kind of failure in the car and don't finish a Grand Prix. Those are the moments that are going to turn this championship, and they can happen at any point between now and the end.
The other thing, though, just to come into this, is teammates can prove crucial in this battle for the championship as well. Lando Norris for the Grand Prix does have Piastri sort of up there with him within that top five.
Starts P5, yeah.
But Max Verstappen, where's Sergio Perez?
Once
P10?
again, yeah.
Again, he doesn't have a rear gunner, and that limits Red Bull what they can do in strategy. If there's something crazy that goes on, McLaren will most likely have 2 cars to play with. Red Bull will only have 1, and yes, that one is Max Verstappen, but it does limit you.
Is a Max Verstappen worth 2?
True.
Carlos Sainz, I thought he was really impressive all day.
Yeah.
And he came into the pen, he was happy with himself, and I think it's game on for him. It's not often that you can say Sainz has wiped the floor with Leclerc, but this weekend he's on top.
100%, and I think he's the real dark horse for this Grand Prix. Even in the sprint, he looked incredibly confident. He was racy, battling his teammate all the way through. He was never going to give that up, and ended up finding his way well onto that podium in P2. But I think even more than that, if you look at qualifying for the Grand Prix itself, he was on a blistering lap until the yellow flag came out. On his own dashboard, he said he was 3/10 up. That would have put him on the front row.
Yeah, he reckoned he could have got that front row. Let's listen to him.
Yeah, very happy, very pleased. We've put together some very strong laps in quali, especially that last lap of Q3 was feeling quite a bit more special than the others. 3/10 up to turn 16, that would have put us in the ballpark for pole position, but at the same time, we start P3, which is a much better place than the sprint, and with a good race pace, obviously the target is to keep moving forward.
Seems like you've had a fun day with that sprint race as well, and it gives us a lot to look forward to tomorrow. What do you think you can get?
A bit of a hectic one. Also, this sprint format honestly is so crazy that we have to do a race first thing in the morning after waking up, put together that crazy battles, and then suddenly refocus and go for a qualifying lap. But
I'm glad it's not just me that's totally discombobulated
I'm exhausted
by
today,
this.
But hopefully tomorrow it's another one of those. Full focus in trying to obviously win it, but I think our rivals will come stronger tomorrow, especially after everything they've learned from the sprint.
Harry, you equally as impressed with him?
I think Sainz has been performing so well this weekend. My favourite stat about Sainz, and this is now out of the window, but before the sprint race, in every sprint this year, Sainz has started at 5th and finished at 5th. Just how random. But
is that the best stat that you have?
It's not the best stat.
Whole season?
It's not the best stat. I just found it quite funny. I was like, God, 5th in every one. Like, how annoying for Carlos Sainz.
There was a point where Alonso had the same thing last year. He'd finished everything 5th, and it was consecutively 5th, and you just go, you must get really hacked off with just finishing 5th.
I think he'd be desperate for that now.
Yeah.
But Sainz was quick right from free practice 1 this weekend, and actually I think he will be a player, at least in the early stages, for the lead of the race.
Yeah.
That Ferrari is going well. I'm amazed that Fred Vasseur and Ferrari were letting them battle for as long as they did during the sprint, and thank God they did, because it was such a brilliant battle. It was really clean, it was close, but that's what we want from racing. 2 Ferrari drivers going absolutely at it. We know Charles Leclerc, in at least 1 lap pace, has a couple of tenths over Carlos Sainz. But Sainz is an incredibly fast driver. He's also an engineer in his brain.
Yeah.
He can play the long game, and he knows how to make the strategy come to him. So I think tomorrow he'll be a real player.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the other thing that we saw from the sprint was that if you compare the likes of Ferrari to, say, McLaren and the Lando Norris, Ferrari had way better degradation, way better tyre life towards the end of that race, and that's what allowed really Carlos to get past Lando on the penultimate lap. If that continues into the Grand Prix over the longer stint of a Grand Prix, Ferrari are in good shape. And actually, Ferrari have looked one of the most improved teams here generally. Both drivers, it has been Carlos Sainz has been the sort of most dominant of the two, but the team itself looks to be in the best shape it's been for quite some time.
Is there something to be said for Ferrari not having brought upgrades this weekend? It's such a weird weekend with the sprint timings and not having more practice, just the one on the first day on the Friday. Do you think they've played a blinder by actually not bringing their upgrades until maybe next weekend?
Do you know what there is a lot to be said for, and that is not getting yourself confused. I think Mercedes might well be guilty of this. Not getting yourself confused. And we just talked about earlier how sort of peaky the cars are this year, particularly how difficult they are to set up. You bring a raft of upgrades, particularly on a sprint weekend when there's very little practice time, one session only on a Friday morning. You don't get the opportunity to really fully understand those. I think Mercedes have suffered because of that. If you look at Ferrari, who've brought a consistent car since Singapore, maybe they're just getting on top of it, maybe they understand it a little bit more, and maybe this circuit's helping them out as well.
You guys, I know, are desperate to get away to M&M, who's playing tonight. At home, you're probably listening to this in the morning because of the time shift, so it's race day for you guys. There's a lot to look forward to with two Ferraris on the second row of the grid. Then you've got Piastri and Russell, who, I mean, it just all went wrong, didn't it, at the end? And we've had a few issues with him doing that, but he was pushing that car as much as he could, just overdriving it.
Well, I think, for everything I just said about Ferrari, and we talked about them not bringing upgrades, Mercedes brought a substantial upgrade package this weekend. With that limited amount of practice, it feels to me like they've been on the back foot since the weekend began, and they've been chasing their tails a little bit, trying to understand how to get the best out of it, and they haven't really found it. I said earlier on that George Russell delivered a blistering lap time in sprint qualifying that was super quick, but he was on the ragged edge trying to do it, and it felt like it was so compromised that if you hit a bump in the wrong way, hit a curb, the back end would snap out. Both drivers were compromised by that over the course of Friday. George hit exactly the same sort of thing today, where he just went into a corner too quickly in turn 19, lost the rear end in a really aggressive fashion, and before you know it, he was in the barriers.
Well, let's hear from him.
It was a difficult session to understand because yesterday both Lewis and I were fighting for pole. Today we were both almost out in Q1. Q3 I was 6/10 off, and ultimately I was pushing too hard to try and find performance that was not there, and I paid the price, and I'm really disappointed and upset because the team have worked so hard to bring these upgrades, and now they're in the bin, and we're all pushing the boundaries here to try and get some big results, and it didn't go our way today.
So does that mean you'll have to take a step back tomorrow and not have an upgraded car? Do you have to take a...
Yeah, we don't have any spares. I mean, Lewis has kindly offered me his, but we're not going to swap. So I'll have to be reverting this for tomorrow.
Okay, what do you think you can do from P6?
I have no idea, to be honest. After practice, I thought we can fight for a win. After the sprint, if we can hold on to the front, I'll be happy. Now, reverting back on the upgrades, I really don't have an answer.
Well, I thought that was quite nice of Hamilton having offered to give him his upgrades to Russell. Very team-spirited. They've only got 6 races now as teammates before Hamilton leaves for Ferrari. It wasn't a good day for Mercedes, was it?
No, it wasn't. I think Lewis Hamilton not happy with the setup of his Mercedes. That's really what cost him, and falling out in the first part of Q1. And well, if it wasn't for Liam Lawson getting a grid penalty, Hamilton would be starting on the back row for the US Grand Prix track, where he was the most successful man around it. It's incredible. But his goodwill, his good gesture highlights, the importance in an era of cost cap of upgrades, and how it's all well and good pushing car to the limits, but you've got to know where the line is, and smashing into the wall with so many races left to go, where the parts you're bringing now, they're for the end of the season, but we've got an evolution for next year too, so they're going to be on that car most likely. It's a high stress atmosphere, and it's something Russell didn't really need to do.
I'll be honest, I think the team will have more sympathy with George Russell than they will with Lewis Hamilton today, because I think George was pushing, at least he was in a position to be fighting for sort of top 5 positions. Lewis Hamilton to not make it out of Q1 in a Mercedes that we know has got pace in it, I think is just not good enough. And I don't know what the actual reason was, but And Lewis Hamilton fans are going to come at me for this. I can already see it happening. But it's not a good enough performance by Lewis Hamilton today, and that is the bare fact of it.
So Hamilton finished qualifying in P19, very disappointing. Elsewhere, we'll rustle through this. So Gasly, Alonso, Magnussen, Perez, the top 10. We've already touched on Perez. Then Tsunoda, Hulkenberg, Ocon, Stroll. Liam Lawson will take that engine penalty. Albon, Colapinto, Bottas, Hamilton and Zhou make up the top 20. So game on. It should be a great race today. Let's turn it around. It's almost midnight. What do you reckon?
Can I just give a shout out to Kevin Magnussen
What?
in the Haas?
Why?
Getting into Q3 for the first time this season, out qualifying his teammate Nico Hulkenberg. I think it's a mighty effort.
In that
Yeah.
case, yes, you can.
Thank you very
Absolutely.
much.
I just wanted to know why.
Look, he's a fan favourite. I want the Dane to go out this year and enjoy his last few races. He's not going to be on the grid next year unless something ridiculous happens. And I've just been quite impressed with both Haas cars this weekend so far. And you know, if you don't know me by now, you know how much I love the battle for 6th place in the Constructors. And it's a ferocious battle.
Mark, any final thoughts?
Well, I agree with that and on Magnussen, but it wasn't even a freak lap, was it? That's where they've been all weekend. They've been up there or thereabouts inside the top 10, so wonderful stuff for them. A shame for the two Williams. I was expecting a little bit more from them. Alonso, I guess, did a decent job to drag that car into the top 10 as well. But looking forward to a real fight at the front between Max Verstappen, Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris for me.
Yeah, it should be a great race. Make sure you join us from 8 o'clock on Sunday evening. Thank you so much for listening to The Checkered Flag. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.